On today's episode of the How Did It Happen podcast, I am talking about a fun little word called Jabroni, Jabroni. We're going to explore what it means, where it came from, and why it's so interesting. I really enjoyed making this episode, and I hope you enjoy it as well. Here it is. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. I'm Mike, and thank you so much for joining me today for this solo episode. And I'm going to have a little fun with this one. I'm actually going to mostly read an article that I read by Ben Zimmer. Ben Zimmer is he's a writer for the Wall Street Journal, and he writes a column every week called Word on the Street. And what he does is he takes a word and he basically gets into the history of the word. I know there's a fancy term for it that begins with an E, but it's escaping me right now. But he takes a word and researches the history, and then gives you the origin of the word, or the history of the word, or the various iterations of the word, throughout the time it's been used. And this one has a kind of a football connection to it in a number of ways. And I'm a big football fan, and so I thought this would be good to share. He calls his article Trash Talk for a Fool or a Loser, or maybe a ham. When the Kansas City Chiefs defeated the Cincinnati Bengals in the AFC Championship game last Sunday, and this is me here, and then went on to defeat my Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl 2 weeks later, Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce needled Cincinnati's mayor, Aftab Pureval, for having mocked the Chiefs in the lead up to the game. This is Kelce's quote. "Hey, I've got some wise words for that Cincinnati mayor," he said during the trophy celebration. "Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni. Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni." The mayor, for his part, was a good sport about it all, tweeting, "Yeah, deserved that." And as he told the Cincinnati Enquirer, he knew exactly what it meant to be called a jabroni because he had grown up watching professional wrestling. In wrestling parlance, a jabroni is a fool or a loser. And this is where it got really interesting for me. The wrestler most associated with the jabroni insult is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who frequently slung the word against his WWE rivals as he became a fan favorite starting in the late 1990s. "Know your role and shut your mouth" was also part of The Rock's pugnacious ringside patter. Mr. Johnson, however, is quick to point out that he did not coin the word jabroni. He gives credit to wrestling great Khosrow Ali Vaziri, better known as the Iron Sheik. And just as an aside here, I was a big wrestling fan, but before WWE and all, because I'm too old for that. So mine was back in the 70s when wrestling was just as, I was going to say fake, entertaining, but not nearly as big of a show as it is today, or was when The Rock was involved in it. But anyway, as The Rock explained in a 2015 interview with Esquire, the Iron Sheik was famous for saying the word constantly backstage. Jabroni, jabroni, jabroni. Around 1998, I thought, why can't I say it on TV? So I started saying it publicly. But the Iron Sheik, he's the one who was known for it. If you like what I'm doing with this podcast and want to participate in more of the things I'm thinking about and exploring, subscribe to my newsletter today. It's super simple. Just go to MikeMalatesta.com right now, put in your email, and you will get the very next issue. It's short, thoughtful, and designed to inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you. As for the word's origins, Mr. Johnson surmised that it was carny talk, since wrestling used to be a featured attraction at carnivals. In fact, jabroni has much older roots as an insult for a contemptible or worthless person, going back more than a century in American slang. The earliest known incarnation, that's a new word, of the word was jaboni or gibboni, first appearing in the writings of Jack Conway in the magazine Variety. Written in the style of letters to friends, Conway's columns were packed with jazz-age slang. He is credited with popularizing such words as scram, bimbo, palooka, and baloney. In the June 27, 1919 issue of Variety, Conway told of New York City grifters who were having trouble finding chumps to swindle. They ride up and down on the subway without seeing a prospect. Nothing but a bunch of jabonis going to work. Following year, Conway wrote of a baseball player. This jabroni couldn't play without he was manicured, and if he wasn't shaved, he wouldn't think of getting into a uniform. While the ultimate origins of the epithet are unclear, one theory posits that it comes from glambone, an Italian dialectical word for a foolish person, derived from the Piedmontese spoken in northwestern Italy, which in turn comes from giambon, a regional term for ham related to the French jambon. In American usage, the word spread in a number of derogatory directions. A 1931 collection of prison slang defined a jabroni as a greenhorn or a newly arrived foreigner. Word researcher Barry Poppick discovered recently the spelling Jabroni, E-Y, instead of Jabroni, in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle of November 15, 1924, offered by a correspondent as an alternative name for a hobo. The only word a respectable law-abiding bum would answer to is jabroni. That's the quote from the article. The spelling jabroni, Jabroni, became popular as the word made its way into the world of wrestling, but its meaning could be more specific than any old loser. A 2020 entry in dictionary.com says, but jabroni can refer to a wrestler whose purpose is to lose matches against headlining wrestlers in order to build up the status and fame of the headliners, also known as a jobber. Inside or outside the ring, you don't want to be on the receiving end of the jabroni jab, is how Mr. Zimmer ends his article about jabroni. I thought it was fun. I have heard the term before I read this. I don't know if I heard it when I was a kid growing up outside of Philadelphia, but maybe feels like that's probably where I heard it. But I thought it was very funny and a little disrespectful for Mr. Kelce to refer to the mayor of Cincinnati that way. But, you know, that's the way our politics goes now. There's not always a lot of respect. And maybe, you know, maybe it's a two-way street. Maybe they haven't earned our respect. But anyway, I thought it was fun. I hope you thought it was a little bit of fun and got a little bit of education out of it. And maybe you know now how to use the term jabroni with your friends. And you know a little bit more than you knew before listening about where that word came from and what it means. So thank you for investing time with me today in this podcast. I hope that you got a positive return on that investment. And if you did, please consider following or subscribing to the podcast so that every episode comes to you automatically. And in the meantime, until we meet again, please do everything you can to maximize your greatness and make your future your property, a future you design and are proud to own. Thanks for listening to this episode of the How Did Happen podcast, where we believe that success doesn't happen unless you make it happen. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And while you're there, please rate it and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the show, ideas for future guests, or whatever you'd like to share. And of course, you can always find me at MikeMalatesta.com. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to the How Did Happen podcast.